we must get ourselves ready before we get online. We must,
yes, please.
Yeah. No. I'm ready. Okay. Yeah. How shall we organize? How's the moderator? Okay. We are all depend on you. Okay.
Yes.
You are the key driver. Okay, please.
Yeah. So I begin. We still just kickstart because of the timing. So good morning and good afternoon to all of you. So those that have joined us, we're hoping to take more people to join us. So this session is recorded, and of course, this is the Global Economic Ideas Festival 2022, which is put together by the ICC, the Institute of Certified Chartered Economists. The ICC is a professional body that is providing certification in economics. So individuals that are working as economists, or individuals that are aspiring to pursue a career as economists, or maybe your current or your future role requires that you have some knowledge in economics, then of course we will recommend the ICC qualification to you. And with us, it's a membership base, so you have to first enroll as a member, and thereafter, of course, you get a chance to take a certification through a series of examinations that we offer, which is structured according to the curriculum that we have provided. Most importantly, we try to create platforms that will engineer conversations that are meaningful, that as economists, and of course, we can also make our voices heard and also help to be part of the solution that we need to create the kind of world that we need. And this is why, for the first time, we are hosting the Global Economic Ideas Festival. So this is the annual global conference of the ICC. So it's going to be held every year. Originally, it was planned to be held physically in Mumbai. Because of unplanned circumstances, we had to move it virtual. But we are very hopeful that in 2023, this meeting will be held in person at a venue or a city that will be announced later. We started off yesterday with a series of sessions, which were very exciting and insightful. We had conversation covering various issues. Some were country specific, and of course we had global and regional kind of conversation as well. And today we are very excited to begin the session with yet another major economy in emerging market context, which is the broader scope for the GEIF. We kind of bring in global voices to delve deeper into emerging markets. So we had a session on India yesterday. Today we're having the first session on China, which promises to be very insightful, because for us, we're very fortunate to have experience, and of course individuals that have more knowledge on the ground, worked across China on many years and across various segments. So we look forward to having a very insightful discussion for our first session. Of course, there are other two sessions to run up the GEIF 2022, which will come at 11 a.m. CET, and then of course at 1 p.m. CET. So now we'll just zoom in to our first session, and to help us moderate the session and of course introduce our panelists will be David Guda, who is a senior research fellow at the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory. So David, please, you have to take over and run us through the session for the next 1 hour with our panelists. Thank you very much for listening to me. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Paul. And you are all welcome to this edition of our forum. I want to first of all introduce our speakers. We have two speakers here. We have Hannah Ryder, who is the CEO of the Development Reimagined. Hannah is a former diplomat and economist with 20 years of experience. She was named as one of 100 most influential Africans in the year 2021. She is also senior associate for the African program of the Center for Strategic International Studies. She sits on the board of the Environmental Defense Fund and is a member of the UAE's International Advisory Council on the New Economy. Prior to her role as doctor, Ms. Ryder led the United Nations Development Program, the UNDP's work with China to help it scale up and improve its cooperation with other developing countries, including in Africa. She has also played various roles on the UN and OECD and co-authored the seminal Stern Review of the Economics of Climate Change in the year 2006. At Development Reimagined, Ms. Ryder drives the overall company strategy for the China, Kenya, and UK offices, working with our clients, partners, and experts around the world to provide strategic advice and practical research and support. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Ms. Ryder. Our second panelist is Dr. Wu. He has a very extensive profile because he's achieved a lot. Dr. Wu joined the Ministry of Finance of the People's Republic of China in the year 1986. Through his entire career at the Ministry of Finance from 1986 to the year 2012, Mr. Wu was once served as the Deputy Director of the Programs Division in the World Bank Department, the Director of IFI's Division, and the Deputy Director General of the International Department. During this period, Mr. Wu also served as the Alternative Executive Director for China in the World Bank, the IFAD board member for China, and the GEIF council member representing China. While mainly focusing on external relations and cooperation with the World Bank and other IFIs, such as the ADB and the EIB, Mr. Wu was also an active member of the Chinese delegation responsible for financial matters in the negotiations of international environment conventions, such as the UNFCCC, CBD, Montreal Protocol, and Stockholm Convention, and served through the whole process as the Chinese representative for the Green Climate Fund Transitional Committee, and accumulated rich experience in green and climate financing. After working over 23 years, Mr. Jin Kang-woo retired from the Ministry of Finance and took a new position in the International Fund for Agricultural Development in January 2013, where he has served as Chief Asia and the Pacific Liaison Officer within the Partnership and Resource Mobilization Office and Special Advisor to the President. While at the International Fund for Agricultural Development, Mr. Wu played a critical role in securing the support of IFAD member states from Asia and the Pacific region for both the 10th and the 11th replenishment consultation of IFAD financial resources in 2014 and 2017, respectively. Since his retirement from the IFAD in December 2017, Mr. Wu once worked with CAREC Institute and Africa Risk Capacity as a short-term international consultant. Mr. Wu holds a Master of Arts in Western Linguistics and English Literature from the Peking University in Beijing, China. So this is a brief profile of our various panelists for today's session. We are going to discuss China and the global economy, assessing China's economic transition amidst COVID-19. That's a rather loaded topic for a 1-hour session. So I'll present an overview, and then we zoom in to begin the conversation with our panelists. On July 1, 2021, the Communist Party of China marked 100 years since it was founded in Shanghai. The party, which has ruled China since 1949, now has more than 90 million members, making it one of the biggest in the world. China is playing a growing role in the world economy. It is one of the world's fastest growing economies, and is one of its largest exporters. China is also a significant player of foreign aid and a major borrower on international capital markets. China's contribution to global economic development is 38.6%, about that of the G7 as a whole. Its manufacturing sector and foreign exchange reserves continue to be the highest in the world. It already dominates the global trade in goods and is a significant commercial partner for more than 140 nations and regions. China has focused on adhering to its core national goal of opening up to the outside world and pursuing an open policy that benefits both China and the rest of the world. It has been working to expand its own opportunities for the world and to do its part to foster an open, interconnected world economy that benefits more people overall. In the midst of COVID-19, a lot of speculation has been made on the economic impact of China's economic transition and wider geopolitical developments in international economic relations. This panel will explore key issues on how China will continue its economic recovery and transformation. So I want to begin by asking my panelists to briefly share their opinion or their views on our topic. And the topic is China and the global economy, assessing China's economic transition amid COVID-19. I want to start with Ms. Ryder.
All right. Thank you so much for the very kind introduction and also for introducing this topic so clearly and in the right kind of depth, giving us a good setting for this discussion, David. Well, look, I think there are a few things I would like to share with you to kick off the discussion. And with a disclaimer that I tend to look at the world through an economics lens. Others in Development Reimagined, we're a multidisciplinary team, so they do a lot of geopolitics and international relations, etc., history, geography. I'm a trained economist, so I look at the world as through the eyes of an economist. But I also look at the world and at China through very much of an African lens, and in particular, African interest in terms of how do we work with China, how do we work with all our development partners to achieve Agenda 2063, and in terms of the growth that we need to achieve Agenda 2063 and the development that we need to get there, and also how do we in particular achieve the industrialization that we need to in order to effectively be the third largest economy in the world, not going to say who's number one and who's number two, by 2063, and also the world's largest manufacturing hub, which China currently is, and the African continent has declared that it wants to be, in particular through the African Continental Free Trade Area. So with those things in mind, for me, when we're looking at China, when we're looking at what China's transition means, first of all, we have to, Africans in particular, need to think, well, are the things that are happening in China, are those in line with our interests? Are they in line with our expectation of where we're going to be going, and how can we leverage that as well? Second of all, so it's less a question of what are the geopolitics, what are others thinking about China? It's about what do we think about China? And I think that's often missing in the discussions. So let me give you some thoughts on what China's transition has been meaning so far and where I think it could be going. So far, the relationship between China and African countries has been progressing strongly. If you look at a number of different metrics to be able to look at that question, you look at foreign direct investment, it's been increasing. You look at trade, it's been increasing. And not only exports from China to African countries increasing, but more and more exports from African countries to China increasing and diversifying, importantly, diversifying beyond commodities. And in addition, what we've also, and of course, lending has also been increasing, although in more recent years has been declining. We'll come back to that question. Now,
Thank you.
yes, in terms of the transition, China's transition to shift from an economy that is highly more consumer oriented and more high value added oriented is an opportunity for African countries. And it's something that we can utilize and will work in line with the kind of agenda that I was talking about. The break has definitely been COVID-19, because COVID-19 has put a break on people being able to move, being able to kind of secure new deals, factories being able to move to African countries and so on, increased general risk perceptions across the world. And so I think this is a key issue for us. And how do we kind of work with our Chinese partners to try to kind of bring them back in and basically continue that trajectory, pick it back up from COVID-19 in order that we can still meet the same aspiration that we were meeting, and it looked like we were going to be doing so with China in partnership. That's my opening gambit.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll go to Mr. Wu to also get his first impression of the topic to be discussed. Then we'll zoom in. I've got a few follow-up questions for you, Ms. Ryder, but let's hear from Mr. Wu first before we come to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, David. And also thanks Ms. Ryder for a very good opening remarks that could also help to lead our discussion this afternoon. Well, we're talking about China. Well, it's a big topic. Always when we always talk about China, it's a big topic, because China is, as everybody knows, the second economy in the world, and there's a lot of achievements being made, and also challenges all the way. Frankly speaking, I'm not a trained economist, right? Okay, according to my personal history, David, you have introduced. Wow, give me a lot of high profile. I have never summarized my career like in that way. Wow, it's highly upgraded a little bit of my career. But I allow. In fact, you mentioned a lot of things. It's one runs very quickly through my memory at the international cooperation. But there's a one thing I also mention here when we talk about China. Also, I very much appreciate that the comments made by Ms. Ryder of the China-African development or cooperation. In fact, that is also my favorite subject. If I would like to talk about, I would really like to talk about China and African cooperation. And so today I will share with you my what do you say, thinking or views, not as a trade economist profession, but I would like to see it as a ordinary citizen. I'm a retired ordinary citizen in China, but I experienced, in fact, the development of China, starting when China began formally launched this reform and opening up program. I just entered the university to study in 1978. So that is the year I entered university to study. I have the opportunity, and also that is the beginning, because of the beginning of the Chinese reform. So I had the opportunity to study in the university. So that's true. So in fact, so all can see it, witnessed, I witnessed the development of China as a citizen all these years. So I don't want to right here to take my time to summarize the development of China, the achievements. I think this is the common knowledge of it. But what I would like to say that it's the path or the approach China has taken. It's, for the last 4 decades, what China is doing is consistent efforts, consistent policy, consistent strategy, a consistent objective. So all this generation after we experienced 4 generations of the leadership, higher senior leadership. Okay, and I'm start from the reform year with Deng Xiaoping. Okay, he is the master designer of China's reform. And then Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao. Now we have Xi Jinping. All these the high leadership, they have the consistent policy. There's no, for me, I don't see any strategic change. But of course, there's a fine tune. Now China now has moved on based on the past experience. China has taken the path after start a new journey to achieve its development goals. A new journey to take a new strategic development pattern, what we call Chinese path to modernization. And all this, okay, and all this China's idea, the concept development, always there. But we're talking about there's your question just now. Also, Ms. Ryder mentioned some geopolitical concerns and other issues. But China's strategy is very consistent, despite the turmoil, fluctuating turmoil of the global conflicts, there's some here and there, ups and downs of it. All this the past 4 decades, at least I'm talking about first half decade, but even longer, say since the past 70 years, China has taken a very steady, very consistent approach, no matter what happens outside. So we have a saying, and then they say that it is development that matters. Development, it's a literal translation is development is the hard argument. It's the most convincing argument is development. Development is a very important key to solve the problems, because many of the root causes of the matter economic or social is by development, lack of development. Okay, probably I have to stop here for a while. To let's say give the microphone back to Ms. Ryder. Let's continue.
Okay, thank you.
If you may.
Thank you very much,
David.
Mr.
Okay,
Wu.
back, yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wu. I want to reframe my first question for the panel with a follow-up. So, Ms. Ryder, you spoke about the diversity in the trade now from the Africa side to China. Okay, you also spoke that there is foreign direct investment coming in from China. My first question is that how can China balance the demand for economic recovery with the effects of COVID-19 with reform? How do we place this reform within the environment where Africa is diversifying its trade with China, while China is also increasing its foreign direct investment? Where does COVID-19 recovery sit in all this?
Thanks. Well, so I think COVID-19 has been a really, obviously a challenge for everyone. Africans, of course, where 25% of our population is vaccinated, only 3% of our population is boosted. It's still amazing. COVID-19 recovery, even in those terms, is still something that we're trying to achieve. And we're still feeling many of the kind of supply chain effects, which are quite long-term supply chain effects, including food price rises and all that sort of thing. Now, for China, it's been recovering in a different way. China has maintained a stringent COVID-19 policy and is still maintaining a fairly stringent COVID-19 policy. I'm here in quarantine. Many of my colleagues are in their compounds. And these were experienced by many others across the world, but in the earlier stages of COVID-19 or in 2020. But China has maintained those. And part of the reason is in order to maintain manufacturing output. So kind of making sure that there are no cases in COVID in China means that factories, people can go back to work and continue, and they can continue to supply. Had China kind of gone into kind of serious, the same sort of numbers of deaths, it's not only an issue in terms of hospitalizations, but it's also an issue of disruption to the whole process and managing COVID-19 itself, and especially prior to vaccination. So, China's obviously taking a step-by-step approach, thinking about how that can shift. We'll see where that goes in 2023. And there are obviously many others across the world, even in African countries, we've opened up more. So maybe China will also make a decision to open up more. But there's no doubt that the zero COVID policy has been quite stabilizing for the rest of the world in terms of maintaining supply chains, even though it has been more difficult. And as Africans, we're at the brunt of it in any case, of all of these things. But we did need that stability.
Okay, so I was asking that, how does Africa's increased diversity in exporting to China, how do we take advantage of this environment?
Well, the challenge, it is important that we continue to push for diversification. It is something that we have been doing in the China-Africa forums, which have been ongoing since 2000, and the last one was in 2021. There's a very, very continued big push from African countries for the Chinese market to open up and to create more market access. Now we've seen that happen. We've seen, products like avocados come in, chilies from Rwanda, all these different products which never were able to go into the Chinese market before. At the same time, we also need to not just focus on agriculture. And I think this is also up to us as Africans. We need to work on value addition, for example, and still at the same time while saying, well, we're gonna have more access to your markets, China, but we also want to attract more investment. We want to attract more factories into the African continent so that we're processing those products in Africa. At some point we'll be selling light machinery back to China. We'll be producing it for ourselves, etc. These sorts of things are what we need to continue to work on progressively and to engage with our Chinese stakeholders to persuade them to do that.
Thank you very much. I want to go back to Mr. Wu. Mr. Wu, you spoke about the consistency of the China policy, the consistency of the Chinese government. How is this consistency threatened by the current COVID reform that the Chinese government has to implement? So how can China balance the demand for economic recovery with the effects of COVID-19 within reform? How has consistency threatened this so far? Mr. Wu, your line is still muted. Mr. Wu, we cannot hear you. If you can unmute so we can hear you. Mr. Wu, if you can unmute so we can hear you.
Okay, because just I don't want to interfere with the voice interfere with the Ms. Ryder speaking. Well, I just mentioned this. Thank you, David, for your question, and also I would like to thank Ms. Ryder for the comments on the China's approach and to deal with the COVID-19. As you also, David, you asked me about this policy, consistent policy. Maybe we can get for probably for the outsiders, sometimes they cannot understand why you have this consistent policy. Like, for example, like the COVID-19, I think they start from 2020, and the policy, our policy, basic policy to deal with the COVID-19 is very consistent. Just give you one example. This is the amendment. But when I was talking about the consistency, it's about, I think it's mainly about the strategic planning, or the strategic vision is very consistent. But it does not mean that we do not make adjustment here and there. But of course, consistent policy is not a stubborn policy. A consistent policy is to have a long-term strategy, but with a short-term adjustment whenever it's necessary. So I don't want to my comments be misunderstood that we just stick to one policy and never change it. No, but we need a minor adjustment. When the economy makes difficulties, we also make adjustment. Now, talking about the method, the approach about the COVID-19, the challenge. Now, the government has taken a package of policies. It's a very coordinated, we call it a coordinated package of policies to deal with, first, to stabilize the economy. We call it to stabilize the economic growth, and to deal with the COVID-19 challenges, and also to continue the reform. So there's three things, there's three keywords, okay? Economic growth, recovery and growth, COVID-19, and reforms. All these three things now they still continue to develop. So the government put out a lot of policy on the micro side, because of the timing, I cannot explain here. But on the micro side, the Chinese government have the micro policy to deal with, to stabilize the economy, to keep the market entities, viable, and to meet the needs of the basic needs of the people, and to make an international, both the trade, and to ensure trade and the investment and supply chains, and on the one hand. On the other hand, also address the difficulties of the localities, okay, to meet the people's basic needs. Okay, also the normal functioning of the primary level governments. Well, these are the mix of package policy tools to deal with this. So I think there's but now we have of course the COVID-19 has entered in the new stage. I think the Chinese government also now adapt. They also make adjustment. They recently made an announcement that to adjust their approach, to relax some of the very previously quite strict. But I think it's as Ms. Ryder mentioned a moment ago, that at the beginning, the way the government to control, to prevent and control the pandemics is to make sure that the industrial supply line will be not disrupted. But now with the time going on, with this is going on, it seems now the people start to complain, well, maybe you're too strict measures, maybe to prevent, just to get to the opposite result. So the government now, just today, this morning, the State Council, the Premier Li Keqiang has chaired an executive meeting of the State Council. They made a further decision to stimulate the economy and to prevent it. There's more measures will be introduced to improve the economic growth, to maintain the stabilize the consumption. For example, consumption also there are very many detailed micro measures. For example, that the major projects to be financed. They ask the financial institutions to provide lending so that the major projects could be launched and completed. So they to promote. So now they combining. They try to align investment with consumption. So using the investment arm to boost consumption. So all these policy measures are mixed and to achieve these very comprehensive results. Thank you.
I seem to now get a better understanding of the China policy, that we don't want the world to come to a standstill by having a huge number of cases. And so we want to control the number of cases so that the economy can keep running locally and globally. Thank you very much, Mr. Wu. What challenges does China face in moving away from the export-led, debt-heavy model of economic development to one of consumer-based economy? China is currently very debt-heavy and export-led. What are the challenges that they face as an economy in moving to a consumer-based economy? Ms. Ryder.
I think it's quite a significant challenge. It's a big challenge, especially because China has benefited from a very high savings rate, of personal savings rate, which many African countries in many ways we kind of envy. Scholars that people like Andrew Ali, for example, always talks about how important it is for us to have a higher savings rate so that we can invest into our own economies. But China's had that, many other Asian economies too, and it's benefited from that. But then now kind of persuading people will actually go and consume is quite challenging, and especially in quite an uncertain environment, with COVID-19 and also, of course, other geopolitical, other geoeconomic challenges. Uncertainty always means people want to save more. It's rational to feel that way. So it is going to be a challenge. But as Mr. Wu was saying, the kind of policy that China's had of this sort of kind of trying different steps, also trying to deliver. There's a scholar called Yuan Ang, and she talks about how China has kind of taken the step-by-step approach, piloting, learning from failure in pilots, and then then going to scale. And I think that's what's being experimented with here, and will continue to be kind of encouraging middle class consumers. Of course, there's a much larger middle class in China. The market is growing, and growing in particular areas. But nevertheless, it has to take the kinds of measures that Mr. Wu was talking about, kind of quite active measures to kind of say, you don't have to worry about saving. The country is going to be moving into a strong direction. And you also mentioned debt, right? So again,
Yes,
kind of dealing with local government debt. Governments have had the incentive to create debt because to use debt because debt can fuel growth, and they all had growth targets in the past. But they don't have, as they're now having to balance growth targets, and they've been told to balance growth targets with other types of targets, things like sustainability and so on, and also kind of social, other social issues. So that can also shift as well. So again, the expectation is that the amounts of local debt would also reduce. But again, it's going to take a while. It's not a 5-year thing. It's more like a 10-year plan. But nevertheless, there can be progress.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Wu. So, Ms. Ryder, Dr. Wu, Mr. Wu, I want to find out, how is China's international trade relations evolving? What are the major economic considerations designing foreign policy, trade policy at the moment?
Okay. International trade, China's international trade evolving. Well, I think this is a long story. Okay, long story. But China's international trade with other countries, as you all know, China has now reached the stage as China is the largest trade partner with many countries. And I don't have to mention all this. Even with many African countries, China is the largest trade partner, and also with the European Union, ASEAN countries, and also many of these neighboring countries. So China is the largest trade partner. So, but all this has developed in the fall again. It started from the last 4 decades. Okay, since China started reform, and then the international trade activities start to boom. That I think there's a one lesson I think here is how is China's international trade evolved. It's the China's and the beginning of the reform and opening up. The Chinese was very keen to learn from others. I think this is also it's also experience or was a lesson for the African people. They can also learn from other countries how to develop their trade with other countries, so that to export more. And this China to learning, okay, the China's intention to learn from others, no matter it's a big country or small country. I'll just give you one example, Singapore. Singapore is a very small country, but China has to learn the experience from Singapore. Of course, either say from European major advanced countries like United States and other countries in Europe. Of course, China should learn from their experience, and also the Japan, Korea, so and other neighboring and Southeastern countries, where they have the so-called small 4 dragons. So China has started by learning, and then to pilot those activations, to do some pilot work, and then to expand. So this is a long, they have taken a long way to reach this stage. But I should say here, one point here is that China's accession to WTO is a big push for China to the globalization for China. But I just here get one, I guess I repeat again, learning from other countries' experience is the key for China to develop these trade relations with other countries. Thank you, David. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Wu. Your last comment feeds into my next inquiry. China's accession to the WTO. How are evolving geopolitical, international tensions, environmental considerations, how are all these shaping China's economic development into the future? Ms. Ryder, if you can take that for me. All these geopolitical tensions, the trade, new trade deals that are being signed, how are all these things feeding into China's development into the future?
Yeah. Well, I think no doubt, and we saw even in the 20th Party Congress, a big focus on the word security. And this is in the sense of, if you're talking even about food security, talking about being able to work with more countries to diversify relationships, it matters. It matters. Not to be dependent on particular economies for growth or ideas or markets, to also ensure there's enough sufficient domestic demand, that domestic demand is met as well. All of these things really matter. And what's really interesting is that Chinese government takes a very, very proactive approach to it. And I think that it's interesting for Africans to also realize just how proactive China is on these issues. And I think it also gives us some pause for thought in terms of thinking, how can we also learn from that to also think about how we can develop in a situation where there will be, and we always have had uncertainty, and there'll be continued uncertainty, and where different challenges can happen to wheat. They can happen with regards to gas and oil very quickly. We saw this happen in the 1980s, but unfortunately, as Africans, we didn't shift our own economies and we didn't have the leeway to shift our own economies at that point in time to be able to diversify and become more secure. Now, China's actually, and kind of took a completely different path at that point. Mr. Wu was talking about 1978 going out and reform. China's response to those uncertainties was let's find a way to manage this and make this work for us. And as a result, we've seen so many people come out of poverty and so on. So I think security will continue to be a major issue, but not security in the sense of military security. What I'm talking about is security of supply, security of demand, etc. And I think there are opportunities for African countries as well to benefit from that, not only to learn, but also to benefit from it, like we're seeing with agricultural markets opening up in China, and also in terms of potentially also for investment to shift towards African countries.
Thank you very much, Ms. Reda. Mr. Wu, China is growing in economic significance globally. Share some insights on this growth and how it is evolving. China's growth in the global economy. Share some insights of how it has evolved over the years for us.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I didn't quite get your question. Your question is how China's economic growth and also as the rise, a part of the rise and the global power.
My question,
yes.
My question was that China is growing in economic dominance globally, and this did not happen overnight. Okay. How has this evolved? That's my question.
Oh, okay. How does it evolve? All right. This is a long, I could give you a long list of answers, but this consistent efforts, I should say. Just also it is a little bit related to the previous question, and Ms. Ryder has dealt with. What is the increasing international tensions impact China's economic policy? China. If you look back into if you look at from the back mirror to say the last 40 years, the world has a lot of things happened in the world, but the Chinese people, they're focused on one thing, no matter what happens outside, inside, domestically or outside. They're focused on one thing. That's economic development. They always focus on economic development while dealing with other challenges. So we have the very central policy is that we keep the economic construction as the priority. So no matter what happened. So that is the way that which could explain how this the China's development. They were not disrupted. So this is also my observation of why the China's development in the 44 years. As I mentioned earlier, consistent policy, not to be diverted or disrupted about whatever happened for us, no matter what it is. So that is you focus on what you are doing. You focus on your strategy. You focus on your objective, and you focus your efforts. So I mentioned 3 or 4, 5, 6 focus. You just focus on what you are doing, and do it well, and get the things done, and then you can achieve. So those, but this is I think for the if you can say there's a many, for example, we experienced in the early 90s. The 90s, there's the Gulf, the Middle East, a lot of turmoil, the wars, and then the move, and then Afghanistan, then Libya, also now Syria. No, okay, now we have recently, but China is always focused on economic development. Okay, and well, at the same time, fine-tune our policy to deal with the challenges. But there's also one very key that China also stick to the peaceful development consistently. Okay, peaceful development consistently. That is also, I think, one of the reasons for the success. David.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I want to understand, in spite of China's huge investments in other countries, in loans, in projects. China also attracts foreign direct investment, where entities come to build factories, expand businesses in China. How is China opening up its markets to attract more of such foreign direct investments within the current economic situation? I'll take this from both of you. So I want Ms. Ryder to start first, then I'll come to Mr. Wu with the same question. How is China opening up its market to attract foreign investment to facilitate the growth and expansion?
So obviously, as a business in China, I have very direct experience of this, having set up a business and continuing to work in China. There are a few hurdles to setting up business in China, although of course, like most countries, there are certain protected sectors, and what has been happening over time, and especially as China has grown and become more confident in its own abilities, has been able to has actually opened up more sectors to enable other foreign direct investment to come in. It's been a very sort of planned, targeted approach, while also making the most of foreign direct investment, and where foreign direct investment can really make as positive a contribution as possible. So China's not been as open as many African countries are, for instance, to foreign direct investment. But in many ways, it is probably as open now in most sectors than it is with African countries. And again, I do think that is something that we can learn from as African countries, in terms of how do we make sure that we're getting the right kind of high quality foreign direct investment, rather than any type of foreign direct investment, and making sure that the direct investment is contributing to the welfare of our own citizens, and not only to coming out of to profits overseas. And this is an issue which we have to deal with, not only with regards to our traditional foreign direct investors, but also with Chinese investors. We have to make sure that we also get the most out of Chinese investors who are increasingly going out, and especially after COVID-19 notwithstanding, we're hoping that they would also come to African countries in larger quantities, but it is all about aiming for the right quality, and China itself has got lots of lessons on that for us.
Very much. I'll come back to you to ask about your personal experience in investing in China. But Mr. Wu, please explain to us how China is opening up to attract relevant investment into China.
Okay, thank you, David. I think first when we talk about FDI, I think the China's attraction to the FDI inflows to the country is another successful story, because as part of this overall economic development, FDI inflows to China has played a very important role, particularly in dealing with the export sector. Okay. Just very recently, we just have a recent figure for this year, the first 10 months, the inflows to China's inflow of FDI have increased by, say, let me see, give you the figure, increased by 14%, 14.4% this year, the 10 months of this year. So that is a strong indication that the market is still open, and China is still trying to attract a lot of investment from abroad. When we talk about previously, as I say, where they have the export-led approach, but now we still it is a balanced approach. It's not just the move away from international trade cooperation, but it's rather to take a more balanced approach. It's not to totally get away of the export industry. So from there, and so there's a few words on the financial market. China has opened its financial market opening. Of course, although it's not as strong, as quick and strong and robust as before and early years and attract foreign investment. But in recent years, China's financial market China has introduced a lot of regulations and policy measures to allow foreign investment, foreign companies to invest in Chinese financial market. Yes.
I wanted to ask, which areas of the economy are attracting investments? Are there any areas that the government is looking at bringing in more money? For example, they want more money in technology investments. Government is attracting money in agricultural investments. Which areas are more lucrative? Which areas is the government focusing on bringing in foreign investments?
At present, the government focuses on to bring in high-tech, highly value-added technology manufacturing, high-tech. Okay, and because now is not as the early years of opening up, but with the development with so many 40 years now, the China's government policy is to try to attract more high manufacturing sector in high technology. Just to give you a short answer.
Thank you very much. So, Ms. Ryder, I want you to share your experience of your investment in China. How easy was it? How welcoming was the economy to the investments you were making? Just to encourage others who may be thinking about investing in China.
Absolutely. Well, as I think it was a fairly easy process to invest. Bringing in money into China is not challenging, and it's not difficult to actually set up as a wholly foreign enterprise, which is what we are. There's this kind of myth that you must have a Chinese partner, but that requirement was actually removed back in 2001, and so many foreign-owned enterprises exist from all over the world, including from Africa. We were the first Kenyan foreign-owned enterprise in Beijing, and for African firms in particular, we tend to be concentrated in the cities of Yiwu, and also in Guangzhou, and also Beijing and Shanghai. Yiwu is a big trading hub, just like Guangzhou, but more for small commodities. And there's a very vibrant, rich community of African businesses, mostly foreign, wholly foreign owned in that area, and increasingly so elsewhere. But definitely, the key thing is to get support from other businesses. If there's anything that I could recommend to others thinking about investing in China, it's really to get support and to have a really clear plan as to what kind of market gap you're filling. And I think that's an obvious for every single business. But even when it comes to high tech investing into China, what gap are you trying to fill, especially from a consumer demand point of view? That's going to matter a great deal.
Thank you very much. My last but one question would be, how is the Chinese government managing the centralization of the economy vis-a-vis the benefits of the free market? So the economy is centralized, yet there are virtually every free market economy tendency within the economy. How is the government managing these two? Mr. Wu, you can take that for us.
Okay, I think as well. I think you are talking about there is the how to deal with the relationship between the government and the market. Okay, it is indeed a global challenge to deal with the relationship between the government and the market. But in fact, in China, I think maybe the question, the centralized management, I don't think that China is centralizing its management. You know, maybe the question is a little bit misleading. But in fact, it is things that the government and the market is the two sides of a coin. I think the government. Okay, David, I didn't I see your picture, your lecture. You heard me, David? Okay, because I didn't.
Yes, I was hearing you.
Okay. Actually, because I said the market, the government and the market is two sides of a coin. They cannot live without the other. So, but now what is government is trying to do, how to keep a balance in the leadership of the government and the market. And China is, I don't think Chinese government is trying to centralize this economy. China is, in fact, on the opposite. China is liberalizing its economy for the last 40 years. This is also one of the successful story why China's economy developed so and become the #2 of the global economy. It's because it is relaxed, it's liberalizing its market. It's because of the market-based approach. Until now, the government still take reform measures. Say they have a very repeated reform measures how to streamline the administration procedures, the delegated power, and they upgrade the government service for this. This is maybe you have you know this the measure. That's just to say to provide the government as the visible hand should provide support to the market as an invisible hand. So these two hands, we should be two-handed and to deal with the challenges. So I said, I don't think the Chinese government is centralizing its economy, maybe, but it is true. China has a very large-scale state-owned companies, SOEs, we call enterprises, state-owned enterprises. But many of the state-owned enterprises has also have the shareholding reform. Many of them are now are listed in the market.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm realizing there are still a lot of myths about China, which are actually not true. There's a question in the forum. Somebody's asking about the property market in China. The property market is facing a crisis in China. Will it have any effect on the banking sector in China? And then when China has a problem in the banking sector, it obviously would affect the global economy. So that is where I see the question coming from. Okay,
we have a case because of the case of the one of the largest property enterprises called Henda. How is English? Henda. It's evergreen. There's a property real estate company in China, so it has a financial problem because of that and people. But another thing is now because of the government measure to try to prevent the boom, prevent speculations and the boom of the real estate market. So in fact, it's in a way and to curb the demand of the real estate market. So, but this is a little bit complicated issue. But I think the Chinese government now is trying to resolve it, and now they have a new measure and to the financial institutions now provide fresh lending to these companies to finish the apartment building, to finish the construction of the housing so that the consumers can get their apartment in time. This is one of the recent policy introduced. Yes. So I don't think that the Chinese real estate market will cause huge problem for the Chinese financial sector. I think Chinese financial sector on the whole, is healthy. That's my opinion.
Okay, Ms. Vera, will you make any comment on that?
Well, I think again you have to look at the long-term basics of it. Is there a general low demand for property? Not really. People are trying to move into properties and expand their properties. It's really a case of kind of again managing that transition while the property is being built. Also, of course, construction itself plays a very important part in the economy and generating GDP, creating jobs, all that sort of thing. I think it's really hard to make that kind of judgment as to what's going to happen. And of course, as Mr. Wu was talking about, the Chinese government has got a really large range of policy levers that it can use, including because of having still maintaining state-owned enterprises. Those policy levers are more available to the government to be able to use to manage the economy. So it isn't, you know, like you were saying, there are lots of myths about the Chinese economy, lots of misunderstandings. You know, when you get into China, you see the kind of entrepreneurialism, and it felt, when I first got to China, I remember seeing, you know, so many people like street sellers and so on. It just reminded me of being at home in Kenya. All of that, you know, there's a big informal economy. And in fact, the vast majority of the economy is an informal economy. Those are the numbers that the vast majority of the population is in the informal economy. But the government is trying to formalize, you know, all of these things are shifting. And I think it's very problematic to look at China through the lens of, let's say, you know, what the US property market looks like, or what the European property markets look like, or how they are managed. It's very individual, very different. And it's actually more informative in many ways to look at other Asian markets. You know, Mr. Wu was talking about how China's learned from Singapore. Look at how other Asian markets are working. That can be more interesting and more helpful to really understanding what's going on.
Okay, before I take your closing remarks, we are just about 5 more minutes to end this session. I want to ask, so maybe you take that question and then you give your closing remark, and then we go to Mr. Wu, who also take the same question and gives his closing remark. China, what next? What is next for China?
Oh, what a big question to end. I mean, goodness. I think on a serious note, I think there are probably 3 things that I would say is next for China. First, it is managing these domestic transitions. And these are domestic transitions which have been talked about for a long time. They are a long-term path towards this kind of high value-added economy, consumer-driven economy. COVID-19 has put a brake on it. In fact, kind of made the economy more focused on manufacturing, etc., which it wasn't. That China was hoping to get out of that. It kind of have moved a bit further before that, but still going back now. So those shifts do still need to be worked on. The second area is on greening China. I think that is going to be really important, very interesting and important for everybody to be looking at. We haven't really talked about it, and Mr. Wu, of course, has got a great deal of experience in the climate change area, so do I. How China greens its economy and also helps other countries green their economy, I think is going to be very, very key for us to look at and to be watching and working with, trying to, again, leverage China's engagement in that area. And then last but not least, the Belt and Road question and China's development, Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative. These 3 initiatives, where those move over the next year, I think that they're all going to be expanding. That's my personal take on it. I don't think the Belt and Road has gone away. If you see recent announcements in the Asian markets, we see a resumption of deals with Exim Bank and so on, Pakistan, etc. It's not gone away, but there are other areas that China also wants to work with other countries on. So again, it's how do we leverage those? And if we really do keep an eye out on those 3 things, hopefully as Africans, we can do more with China in that also serves our interests in the best way.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wu, we'll be ending with your response to China, what next, and your closing remarks.
Okay, next. All right, I'll probably also narrow my remarks on 3 points, like Ms. Ryder. First, I think in 1 or 2 or 3, no more than 3 years, China will enter into the category of high-income country. That was a big threshold, because China is now the GDP, in terms of the GDP per capita. Now China GDP per capita now is about 12,500 something, But now the World Bank classification of the high income countries is 13,505, something like that. So there's 1,000 more, while I think with the current, if they keep the current growth rate, like 4 or 5%, 3 to 5%, within two years, I think next year maybe, or the year next, China will become high income country. But still, even into that high income category, but China still remain a partner for developing countries. So China will always regard itself, whether economically or politically or whatever, as a developing country. Second, I think it's the rural. Low carbon, of course, I agree. I agree with the writer. Low carbon, let's say they take a new development pattern. So China will to start to implement a new development pattern, including low carbon, green transition, also rural revitalization. Now China is focused because we have the slogan of common prosperity. Now China is trying to narrow the income gap. So there's a big drive to narrow the income gap so that the 1.4 billion people, the all get on the same level. So that is a huge challenge for China. So there's a long way to go to reach that point. But so I think the new development pattern for the common prosperity will be one. And the rural, of course, particularly rural revitalization is a key to reach that common prosperity. Last but not least, China will be more open. Please rest assured, China will be a more open country, not closed. Thank you. That's the end of my comments.
Thank you very much. We are very grateful to Mr. Wu and Ms. Ryder. I think maybe the next time we have a session like this, we should discuss the myths about China and doing business in China. It will be very insightful, and I'm sure we'll have a conversation around that sometime soon. Thank you very much. Let me hand over to Paul to help us close.
Yeah, thank you very much, gentlemen and lady. We've had so much to get in today from this session. We're so much grateful to you for agreeing to spend your afternoon, evening with us from your base out in Beijing and share this insight with us for the first edition of the Global Economic Ideas Festival. Day 2, we are so much grateful. So on behalf of the board and management of the ICC, we say a big thank you to you for doing us the honor for sharing this insight with us. And this session we'll have available on our YouTube channel and shared and of course promoted. And if any of our audience have questions, please, you can always send to us. I think we received a couple of emails from the ICCE. You can send the question to us. We'll be more than happy to forward it to our panelists so they can answer them for you. And I'm sure you can find them on LinkedIn as well. Hannah is very active on LinkedIn, so you can always reach out to her. I think her name there is Hannah Ryder, so she's always there on LinkedIn, so you can always reach out to her for any follow-up. So that will bring us to the end of our first session for day 2 of the Global Economic Ideas Festival. We have another big session happening in the next 40 or so minutes. That's at 11 a.m. CET, which is focused on technology and inclusive growth. So I'll be happy to have all of you rejoin us for our next session in the next 45 minutes. If you are here with us, definitely you should be checking your email. So we're sending the link there as well because we have specific links for each of our sessions. Thank you and hope to see you in our next session. All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.